Yes, greetings, greetings. This is Rasiadonis Tafar. This is Yadin right here. LOJ Society, the Line of Judah Society. I'd like to address pronunciation, language, ancient and modern meanings and connection. Because we speak the language that we speak today, the English and the Western Gentile languages, and moreover, because we pronounce or even mispronounce words or pronounce it like in what we call a Western Gentile context, many names, many words, that the ancient as well as the modern connections with these ancient and modern words is lost. So there's a cognitive dissonance that occurs even due to lack of linguistic scientific discipline. When we say linguistic scientific discipline, we're speaking about like how words, how names are pronounced, and also the meanings. But once we have the connection between certain ancient word sounds, certain names, we can automatically see possible or even exact modern connections between certain ancient names and nomenclature. So here we're going to begin off here with something that we've mentioned before, but I'd like to just mention this here again. Speaking of the name Caesar, Caesar. I hope one can see this. It's on some kind of a black, I don't know if it's a marble stone right here, but it has two versions of this particular name. Now, often we'll see it as we see it, and we'll say Cesare, right? Some might even say Cesare. That depends on Latin or whether we're speaking Italian. But here, Kaisari. In the ancient Latin, this will be pronounced more as Khazari. Kaisari Augusto. Kaisari Augusto, what's on top? And below it is another variation, Kaiser, Kaiser Augusta. Kaiser Augusta. Now, this you can see right here is at the bottom of this particular statue right here. Basically has it in, if I'm correct, one of them I think is the Latin, right? One of them is the Latin. I'm not too sure if the other one is Italian, right? But just to show that variation right there on this particular statue of the one that's known as Augustus, right? Popularly, we would say Augustus Caesar. But here's the point that we'd like to share is that the pronunciation of the name Caesar, as we study the linguistics and, the different ancient languages or other languages of the East that have a better track record, historically speaking, we see that the name actually is KAISER, KAISER. The Amharic and the Ge'ez of it is KAISER, 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 KAISER. In the ancient Latin, the C sound, right? The C sound would actually be pronounced as a K sound. So the C sound is actually a K sound, right? In this one that the world refers to, this name. Now we have Julius, right? Some of you remember Julius Caesar, right? Now Julius, that particular name, the J, right? That J actually being pronounced as a Y, right? In Latin, it would not be Julius Caesar, but Julius, 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 right? Julius. I think it'd be like named Julia, like Julia, Julia, Julius, right? Julio, Kaiser, Julio, Khazar, Khazar, Kaiser. So here's the connection. Caesar is Kaiser equals Kaiser. Question here, just a research video, and it's a research we're on. Is there a connection with Khazar, Kaiser, Khazar, right, in this particular name? And because we are taught, right, or we are programmed, I want to say more programmed, we're programmed how to speak English. We often have used the JESUS, right? If we see JESUS and somebody's learning English, right, and the JESUS, it should be pronounced as Jesus, Jesus. Right? Jesus from the conventional standard English, but because we're programmed to look at JESUS, the name that they call, quote, Jesus, notice that a Z sound comes in. A Z sound comes in there, but other words that are similarly, if I say I was just jessing, like, Jess, or even Jessica, right? Or to jest, like to joke, it's a jest, right? How does that spell? JESS. We don't say jez, We know if we want to say a Z sound, we put a Z sound. So we use the so-called, quote, Jesus or Jesus and say, where did that Z sound come in? Now, one might say, well, this is just some semantics. Well, semantics do matter, right? Semantics do matter. If somebody calls you outside of your name or by a wrong pronunciation of your name, or you just say, hey, it don't bother me. I mean, some folks would be like that, but it's incorrect, right? It's incorrect. And then when we come from a modern perspective and we're looking at the ancient past, for example, with the name Caesar, people say Caesar because it begins with a C, right? And see the letter C, if you say the letter C, we say the letter C, right? But it has a S sound, like a S sound. But originally it did not have a S sound, right? Even though it used a C, you know, what we call the C, the Latin letter C, it had a K sound. And in exploring the linguistics and looking at certain documents and reading these various different documents, right, from ancient cultures, like we could say the Ethiopian, you know, the highland culture of Ethiopia, the Tewahedo church, even getting into more of the ancient roots, the Israelites of Ethiopia, and looking at a lot of old archaic manuscripts, you know, we see there's a consistency, right, to translation, and there's an accuracy as to what is written and what should be pronounced and how it should be pronounced. But concerning the Caesar matter, let's bring this up right here concerning the Caesar matter. See if we can go here, right? I think we're at this particular page. Now, we already are making the Khazar connection, right? The Khazar. Might sound bizarre, but it's the Khazar connection. Why are we making this particular Khazar connection? Right here. If you look through, you can pause this right here, some of the etymology, right, on Khazar, right? Speculative. They say that the origin is unknown. Check. So the etymology for Khazar, they have a Khazar. But now if you look through some of the different translations or into different languages, right, we see even in Latin here, Khazar is actually put as Gazari, and also Kosar. Now, was that the Kosar, right, or was it Sosar? You see the one Cosar, right? And then in some of the different languages, the Persian has the X, Khazar, Ka. So we definitely know that it's a K sound. In all these other languages, you'll notice it goes from a K sound, right? And the kaf in the Hebrew, we see in the Hebrew is kuzari, right? We also have it in, you know, the Latin for G, gazar, and then it has a C, kosar, Old Armenian, right? Old Slavic, kozarinu, right? Persian, khazar, right? Russian, khazar, with the X kind of have like a K, KH, like a k, right? The Tartar has khazar. Turkish has Hazar, but we know that the H can also kind of be breathy, can also be like a he or a che. We have old Uyghur, I think that's, they say that as Uyghur, the Uyghur, but then we have a Q sound. This is similar to what we have in the Ge'ez Ethiopic and the archaic, the Royal Amharic of Haile Selassie Bible. We have KAISER. That's where it really came up to eye when we were doing research, right? And we saw, biblically speaking, you know, what was there. So here we're seeking to make a link right here between the, let's go back here for a moment to Caesar, what's called Caesar. So we mispronounce this name because it's how we're taught to mispronounce the name. We're taught to say Caesar, right? But Caesar gives us a false impression when we start to look in the past. And then we even start to look at modern evidence and relics. They get lost, or they're not associated because we are mispronouncing the word. Once we go to the correct pronunciation, right, of the word, let's go right here. We was in a Blue Letter Bible search right here, right? You can see we're looking up Caesar. Now, Caesar first appears, right, within, you can say, starting from low degrees, the King James Version of the Bible in the Brit Hadasha, in the New Testament. We have Matthäus, right, Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. And when, you see that name there? Normally, we're taught to say that name as Jesus. My question is, where does that Z come from? Since, in other words, right, the S-U-S, we say sus. We don't say Zeus. For Zeus, we put a Z there. So the difference between what the word is really and what we've been programmed, right? We've been programmed to say it this particular way. And we know English has a lot of inconsistencies of how things are written, right? It's written one way and we're told to pronounce it another way. This is a form of spell. It's a spell, like spell, the spelling, right? The spelling and the saying, well, it's written this way, it's written like this. Don't say that, say something else. This is almost like a form of grimoire, grimoire, a form of magic, right? And I say this because this is the real world. These things really happen. And therefore, we wonder why we can't understand, or why people really don't understand, right, the time they're in, right? Or even in history. How many of us have gone through school and listened to like Roman history, and how many times have we heard Caesar, 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 Caesar? But what if I tell you that the pronunciation of Caesar is KAISER, KHAZARIA, 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 KHAZAR, KHAZAR, KAISER? And we know that there's a group of people, there's a region of the world, right? And this particular region of the world has an ancient history and a link with the Bible, with the Old Testament, and even archaeology can give us a lot when we're looking at things in the right context. So it says, and when Yeshua, right, came into the coast of Khazaria, Philippi, right, he asked his disciples saying, whom do men say that I, right, the Son of Man, right, the Bain Adam, right, am? Who do people say that I, the Son of Man, am? We have this right here. So he was going into a place called Khazaria, right? Not Caesarea, but notice right here. So you see right here, we have the G 2542, right? You can clearly see the name is KAISERIA. If you can read the original Greek, if you understand those letters, very easy to learn. We encourage I and I, fellow Talmudim, fellow disciples. We have to learn these things, because this is also part of the science. And scientia is knowledge. For example, that word science comes from an Old Latin, and in the Old Latin is pronounced as scientia, right? Scientia, right? Or really, in Old Latin, scientia, in the Old Latin. In Oxford, later day Latin, like Oxford University over in England, they now have coined a later pronunciation, and it's pronounced as science. But if you look into the Old Latin, the SC, right, that SC, right, IENCE, right, science, right, SC, science, right, skien. It was actually skien, not science. So you see what's happening? There's a S and it's a C, and it's still a S sound. You see the confusion, right? The confusion to about Babylon. Babylon, the meaning of Babylon, Vavel, right, is confusion, right? The confusion of what? The confusion of tongues, right? So here we have KAISERIA. You can see it written loud and clear right here, KAISERIA. This is the city, right, devoted to that name, and what that name represents, Khazar, Kaiser, Kai. That's why it's C-A-E, not just Khazar, but Kai. The A and the E has an I sound, Kai, Kaisar. But sometimes we do have the S and the Z, right? They tell us J-E-S-U-S is Jesus. So we can say KAISERIA, or we can say KHAZARIA. And here the Thayer definition says it means severed. Now, note that we have nowadays, something called the Caesarean, right? They say Caesarean, the Kaiserian, right? They call it C-section, Khazarian or Kaisar, right? Caesarean, they say Caesarean section. Notice the word Kaiseria is said to mean severed, right? Now the historical of it, this is a brief historical of the city. Khazaria, right, of Philippi, was situated at the foot of Lebanon, near the sources of the Jordan, in the Gaulanitis, right, and formerly called Paneas, right, but afterward being rebuilt by Philip the Tetrarch, it was called by him Khazaria or Kaisaria, right, in honor of Tiberius Caesar or Tiberius Kaiser, right, Khazar. Subsequently called Neronius by Agrippa II in honor of Nero. Secondarily, Khazaria, right, of Palestine was built near the Mediterranean by Herod the Great on the site of Strabo's tower between Joppa and Dora. It was provided with a magnificent harbor and had conferred upon it the name of Khazaria in honor of Augustus. We started out looking at zooming in on his name. It was the residence of Roman procurators, right? Procurators, and the majority of its inhabitants were Greek, right? Were Grecians. Now, it's basically a name of a place. As you can see, there was two places in what they call the Palestine or the Levant that was called Kaiser or Khazaria, right? Kaiser. Now, notice the second spelling right there. Let's just highlight that for those watching the video. Let's just highlight this right here. Notice this spelling right here. You see how they have the C, right? And the S, Khazaria, or if we alternate, because remember from Kaiser, Khazar, comes in the etymology, comes Tsar. We have like the Tsar of Russia, or like the drug Tsar, right? So look at that modern connection with what they call Caesar, but then there's also an ancient connection with Khazar that is missing. And then even deeper, right? You remember Judaically, right? According to we Yehudi, right? And even we black Jews, we also share in this ancient knowledge. You know, Rome is referred to as Esau. Referred to Red Rome. Red Rome is referred to as Esau. I know that many might be familiar with that, with many of the camps of the Hebrews and Hebrew Israelites, the One West, ISUPK, other camps out there, you know, some of the latter-day camps of the Israelites, you know, make that kind of Edom and Rome kind of connection. But this connection of Rome, right, referring to Esau, Rome equals Esau, is a very Judaic, Hebraic idea that actually is my Brit Hadasha, is pre-New Testament of the Bible. And so I'm saying that this idea, right, this Judaic, Hebraic, we can say Old Testament, latter part of the Old Testament idea that Rome equals Esau, Esau equals Rome, Rome equals red, and we also know Esau and the Edom connection, red. So the connection Judaically, Hebraically between Rome and Esau needs to be emphasized, because from a Hebraic, Judaic perspective, this is what we know as truth, and this is pre-Brit Hadasha, pre-New Testament, right? This is going to more of what they would call the apocryphal times. So you know where the apocryphal books are found in the Bible? Well, this knowledge and information is between that 400-year period of time, right, was known during that 400-year period of time between the book that we know as Malachi and the book that we know as Matthew. So this knowledge that in reference to Rome, Rome is related to Esau. Esau and Rome connection from a pre-New Testament Yehudi, Jewish, Judaic knowledge, science idea. So I just want to put that on the record there, because this is what's often lost. So once look at some of our Hebrew Israelite brothers who make the connection between Rome, right, and Esau, and the times of the Gentiles that we are living in, right? The times of, some might call it white supremacy. We call it like the Anglo-American world order, this present time or dispensation that we're living in. And there is the Esau, right, connection. Looking at prophecy too, we can look at prophecy in the apocryphal books also, you know what I mean? you know, like connected with Esau, even the hand of Jacob on the heel of Esau, and how Esau represents this present world system, right? And Yaakov, or Jacob, or Yisrael, Yasharala, we represent that system, that not just new world, but that better world to come. Right? So just pointing that out about the Esau and the Rome connection, just want to emphasize that, right? Because there's much dividends when we start to recognize these crucial points and factors of truth. Right? What we're focusing on here in this vlog right here, as part of a research, sharing this research with I peers, I fellows, with the Chabarim, right? Want ones to look over this and say, okay, what do you think about this right here? Caesar is mispronounced. When we pronounce Caesar correctly, we have Kaiser or Kaisar, Kaisar, Kaiser, like Khazar. Is there connection between Caesar and the Khazar, even, and the Khazarians? What's interesting is that the Khazarians historically are a kind of a Turkish, what we call today modern Turkey, right? In more ancient times, we had the land of the Hittites, right? So there's a Hittite Turkish connection. And what's particularly interesting is that even in the Torah, right, in Bereshith, in Genesis, we find Esau, our brother Esau, right, also known as Edom, he marrying two women, right, who were daughters of Chet. And Chet in the scripture would be the connection with the Hittites. And the land of the Hittites was what we call today modern day Turkey, or what they call Asia Minor. Turkey, that region over there, right, is that bridge, right, that India, Europe connection right up there, and it's known as Asia Minor. So ancient Turkey, which has a connection with the Khazar people, right? Ancient Turkey, right, was known as the land of the Hittites, right? And we have in the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, the first book of HaTorah, Bereshith, we have the connection of Esau, right, marrying two Hittite wives. But then when he found out that his mother, but even moreover his father, was displeased, he began to assume, Esau in the Torah, he begins to assume maybe this is the reason why, even though it seemed as though Jacob stole his blessing, but after the so-called theft of the blessing, we get to see Jacob, right, being blessed again by Yitzhak, right, by Isaac, even after that chapter of the alleged, so-called the alleged. We say it's alleged. Other people go for it because they really don't study Torah. But when you now look into that next chapter, you get to recognize this is where Esau thinks and say, wait, maybe I didn't get the blessing because I married these two, these women, right, that my mother and my father, right, they don't want us to marry the daughters, right, of the Canaanites. Now, some allege the Canaanites are black people, right? There's some out there, right? Pro-black scribes and Pharisees. They will allege that the Canaanites are black people. There's others that will allege, no, the Canaanites are white people. Others would say that the Canaanites are a racial, quote unquote, put strong quotes around race, because that right there is kind of a dubious term, right? But they represent not just one type of people, right? Well, we say among the Canaanites, right, originally, no doubt, we had black people. We already know about the recessive and the dominant gene connection, right? The whole recessive genes that come from the dominant genes. Not to get into the DNA, right, both of the scripture and also what we know of modern science to back up the point, but the latest science basically demonstrates that the modern Arab and the modern Jewish or Khazarian people are related to what they call Canaanite people who resided in the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia, as well as in areas of Turkey, of ancient Turkey, which is the same place we're talking about, the Hittite country. So from the scriptural perspective, Esau, right, he marries into the daughters of Chet, right, the Hittite daughters. And if the country of the Hittites was Turkey, and if Turkey, right? Modern Turkey today, right, is the same place and the region that the ancient tribe of the Hittites, and also we have the Khazar and Khazarian connection, howbeit there is not a connection right here with this Kaiser. Now, this is not to even say, okay, people talk about white, black, and brown, and red, and so forth and so on. We're not looking at that at this point. What we're looking at is whether the facts both we have in the scripts, right, as well as the facts and evidence that we have on the ground, whether they are painting a picture. There is definitely a picture connection between the Kaiser Khazar connection and the Caesar connection and the ancient Esau and Edomite connection and the Hittite connection and later on the Ottoman and Turkish connection and the events that occurred in 740 AD. Right? 740 AD is when it is said on the record, I think it's Shlomo Sands in his book about, what's the book called again? The history, no, the invention. I think it's called the invention of the Jewish people. He speaks about how, according to his research, that the Khazarian, what's called the Khazarian, or some might say the Ashkenazi or the Khazarian, or certain of the Eastern European Jews, right? They first were converted or adopted Judaism by and large, roughly around 740 AD. Now, I want you to note that right there, 740 Anno Domini, or what they call the Christian era, or AD time, right? So that means that before that time, we cannot figure them with the so-called Yehudi, the tribe of Judah, or with the Hebrews or the Israelites in that sense, although, no doubt, being Canaanites or having a Canaanitish relationship, they had relations there. So we found some of the new research that's coming out, I think it's Hebrew University, to be very interesting, because they basically are contradicting some other research that was trying to put distance between the Khazarian people, between the Caucasus Mountains, like, that's the Caucasian. So were the Canaanites Caucasian? Now, when we say Caucasian, just don't think about white, because that's a misnomer right there. Some of the Caucasian people have some features that stereotypically one could say are very black. Right, have some features that stereotypically are very black. Some of them have very woolly hair. Like if you Circassian peoples, look up some research on them as well. So we're not saying that it is white in the so-called Nazi German kind of this total fake mythology of the blonde hair, blue-eyed, this kind of perfect ancient Aryan, all that kind of stuff. No, that's already been debunked, right? But what we're saying right here is that we have a bridge, right, between, we could say, the dominant black melanated gene, and we also have the crossover point into Europe with the Asia Minor, with the Caucasus Mountains, Caucasian Caucasus Mountains, and also with the people that are known as the Khazarian, right, the Khazarian people. And they was known to be a very warlike people, right? So speaking about some of their strengths, right, their strength, they was known to be a warlike people. And there was always this question mark around, well, who was Julius Khazar? Who was this, and how did this name Caesar or Kaiser, Khazar, how did it become so important to the Romans? Next question is, why did the ancient Yehudim, the ancient Jews, especially the Jews of the last, we could say, 500, coming down to the 1,000 or 500 years, as we into that period counting down to the AD, why did they identify, why did the Yehudi, right? Why did our ancestors, many of our ancestors, even we, the black Jews of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, why do we identify Rome with Esau and Esau with Rome? Or even more so, red Rome with red Esau? Why is there this strong identification in Judaic Hebraic teaching that precedes the New Testament, and it flows right into the New Testament actually? These teachings, because even Yeshua Rabbeinu, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis, Yeshua HaNotzri, right, Rabbeinu Yeshua, even many things that he speaks to in the New Testament to those, learned Yehudi, and Judahites that have studied some of the ancient teachings, they know that even Yeshua is speaking many of these truths too, that were part of the the Maccabee, the middle period. So between Malachi and Matthew, right? There's about 400 years. There's 400 years. That's the missing part. The apocryphal books of 400 years. So we can see the development, right, of who's who, right, roughly at this time. But the question is, why does Julius Caesar, Julius Khazar, why does he become such an important figure that even his name becomes synonymous, right, with the Roman Empire, and particularly with the monarchy? Because prior to Julius Caesar and Julius Caesar, the part that's important with him is that there was this dispute in society whether they wanted to be ruled as a republic, right, the republic for which it stood, or whether they was going under monarchy. And the ancient Romans, right, or the Latins, right, the Latins, because they took over from a melanated people called the Etruscans, that they were very much anti-monarchy. They did not like kingship. They did not like monarchy. Let it be duly noted that the Romans did not like kingship and monarchy, but Julius Caesar, Caesar, right, Cesare, as he's variously called, right? I'm talking about the original one. Not talking about Caesar Borgias or Cesare Borgia. But even him, with that particular name, which is derived from the Kaiser name, what about this name? This name seems to be a very significant name. How has this name been attached to various, we could say, Roman rulers? And then we see the point man for all of this was Julius Caesar, and he appears as somewhat of a mystery. Even the first one, I think it was, what was it, Augustus or Tiberius, who was the one that followed him, that even him, right, did not, how can I say, was not his son. He was known as his son, but there was no blood relationship, right? And questions on Caesar's or Kaiser's, his militancy, his warrior skill, right? He was very warlike, and he was very successful in his wars. This is another attribute of the Hittite people. This is another attribute of that particular region in ancient times known as Turkey or Constantinople, or even before that Byzantium, and before that as the land of the Hittites. And it's right there in relation to Khazaria, right? And they are known to be a kind of a Turkish, right? Eastern European, Slavic, and Turkish people. And these Slavic, right, slave, question mark. Remember that term slavery come from the Slavs. And many of the Slavic people have certain features that are, how can we say, are black features. Some of them have woolly hair, right? Some of them have full features, right? Some of them basically, you know, resemble, you know, we could say like mixed black people, as what we would say mixed black people, you know, like, you know, somebody who's from mixed race. Well, many of the ancient pictures and testimonies of the Circassian people, and many of the Caucasian or Caucasus Mountain people of that region. So these people are all related to the same people of the book. So what we're doing is looking at the biblical and then tracing it forward into like modern times, taking the data and information and seeing how well it links. And we're finding deeper links even in the biblical narrative, especially concerning Esau. So Esau, in a sense, bred himself, right, into, right, the Hittite and the Canaanite clan, right? And then to have Rome later on being identified by the Yehudim, by the Jews, even we the black Jews, as being Esau. So a code word in Judaic writings, right, referring to Rome as Esau and Esau as Rome. And then we have this association of red, right? That red is a very, and we know how important that color red became to Rome, especially in the times of the monarchy. And the times of the monarchy, right, began with Khazar. So is there an Edomite connection with Khazar, right? Is there an Edomite connection with the one that they call Caesar? So here, in looking at Caesar quickly right here, you can see that Caesar's name is Kaiser. Kaiser. This is the very same terminology used for king or emperor in German. We also have from Kaiser or Kaisar, right? Kaisar, Kaisar, Kaiser, Khazar. We also have the Russian, right, version of it, Tsar, like the Tsar, T-S-A-R or T-Z-A-R, the Tsar, right? And often we know this in this Western Gentile America that they have like a drug czar, a this czar, a czar of that. This is like some person that you give complete power and authority, right, to gain the victory on some aspect, right? He's like an imperator, right? They had in Rome what it was where they didn't like kings, but they had placed into Caesar this power, but later on it becomes a question, right, of republic or monarchy. And this is one of the reasons why it is said even in Julius Shakespeare version, which has become almost like pseudo-historical, the reason why Caesar was killed, right, because of the whole question about monarchy. But right after that, monarchy comes in, and all of the monarchs that come in after Julius Caesar, right, they all adopt the same name of Kaiser, Khazar. That becomes the key connection. So what is this connection here? And why do they try to cover it up by having us say Caesar? But then we look right here, and in the Greek times, he was known as Kaisar, Kaisar. See, we start to have the right pronunciation of it, things are going to click. We're going to see other connections. Now, Caesar or Kaiser means severed, as we pointed to. This was the surname of Julius, right? Julius Caesar or Julius Caesar, who adopted by Octavius, right? Augustus, right? And his successor. So it was Octavius, right? So Octavius became the Khazar, the Kaiser, right? The quote Caesar, and his successors, it became a title, right? This became like the title, like we say a czar, right? Kaiser, and was appropriated. Notice how this word now kind of comes into the Roman usage, right? And this word also, and the meaning of this word also comes down to us today in German with Kaiser, right? Also in Russia with Tsar. Right. We also have later on somebody else with that similar name who has a powerful effect on world and human history, Caesar, Cesare Borgia, right, as well as counterfeit Christianity and that Cesare Borgia, Kaiser Borg, the Khazar Borg mentality. So it was appropriate by the Roman emperors, right, as part of their title. In fact, it became the title in effect for emperor. Right, for emperor. So it's a noun masculine. Here we go down to this right here just to give ones and an overview. Now we have just a little bit more to just share here quickly on this. Like going back to this page here, it says an emperor, a ruler, a dictator. In the late 14th century, it's now spelled differently as C-E-S-A-R from the C-A-E, Kaisar, Kaisar. So it's Caesar, Caesar, or Kaisar, Khazar, Khazar from Kaisar. Originally a surname of the Julian gens, the Julians gens, their genes in Rome, elevated to a title after Caius Julius Caesar. Notice his name. They'll say Caius, some say Gaius. Some will say Gaius. So sometimes the K sound can be a G sound, depends on the language and the speakers. But here we have Caius Julius Caesar, 100 BCE to 44 BCE. So this is about, he dies or is killed 44 years before we could say the New Testament time, right, so-called officially begins. He became dictator. It was used as a title of emperors down to the time of Hadrian. Now, Hadrian in Judaic writings and in our teaching plays a very important role, right? The Hadrian. So it's interesting that they said this title, right, of the emperors, right, of the Roman dictators, right, of the Roman, we could say Esau's, it comes down to the time of Hadrian in 138 CE. So that's 138, like the AD of the Christian era. Now, the name is of uncertain origin. I want you to note that right there where they said the name is of uncertain origin. So what we're doing the research here is to get to the origin. Right, it's like the Stargate, right? Origins. You remember Origins? Kind of interesting when you start to think about it in the context historically, but origin. So to say the name is of uncertain origin. Pliny, right? He derives it from Kaisaris, which they say means the head of here, right? So you see right here, derives it from Kaisaris, which means head of here, because the future dictator was born with a full one. So some say, well, the reason why they call him Kaiser, right, Kaiser, is because of his head of here. Now I want you to note the Edom connection right here again. Could this be a link with the hairiness of Edom, right, or rather of Esau, of Esau, who was called Edom, right? He was called Edom, right? So they say that this might be because he had a full set of hair. And notice that about Julius Caesar and some of the Caesars, especially related to Julius or Julius Caesar, that he's always pictured with a full head of hair, right? A full head of hair, like very hairy. And that's also a Hebraic tell right there in connection with, not saying that hair is bad, but with the sign concerning Edom, right? We see this also as being true, right, concerning the first one of the namesake, the first of the name, as it were, right here. Do we have anything down here? Okay, it's not so clear right there, right? But this is no doubt Augustus, right? Augustus, who became like the adopted son of Caesar, Octavius, and he is the one that basically kicked off, right, this string, this line, this lineage of the Kaisers, right, the Roman emperors. And we already should know the powerful effect, right, that this had, you know, on the world, right? Even coming down to the tin pot, right? They call Mussolini, Benito Mussolini was the tin pot Caesar, right? The tin pot Kaiser. Now, here's what's interesting. Notice how Benito Mussolini right here, right, who's a part of the deadly wound of the beast being healed. Have you heard about it? Have you read about it? Right, what they call the deadly wound of the beast being healed. If you haven't heard about it, go look up the deadly wound of the beast, right? The deadly wound of the beast, and look up Mussolini. If you look up those two, no doubt it will come up to some pages, some very, very interesting revelations, because this has a lot to do, you know what I mean? This has a lot to do with right here. Let's go down to this, see if we can bring this in right here. We'll get into some more details on that, because there's a particular time period, and it's interesting to see that Benito Mussolini in 1928, he signed this agreement, right? He was the broker of this agreement that restored to the Pope of Rome not just a ecclesiastical authority, that he's the head of his church, right, but also, right, he's a king, right, the king. In other words, there's a verse in the Bible, Revelation chapter 13 verse 2, right, where it says, and the dragon gave him power and his seat and great authority. The dragon gave him what? Gave him power and his seat and great authority. Revelation chapter 13 verse 2. Now it was Emperor Justinian who, quote, gave Rome to the Pope. So historically speaking, it was Emperor Justinian who, quote, gave Rome to the Pope when he decreed that the Pope, right, the Roman Papa, the Pope should be over all the Christian churches of the earth, and established the papacy. The papacy was officially established in 538 AD. So you hear a lot of people talking about the Pope and the papacy, but they don't even have the historical facts in right order. The papacy was established in 538 AD, right, when the emperor's general, Belisarius, he drove out the Ostrogoths from Rome. Now, this has a lot to do with what Revelation talk about, like the 10 heads and the 10 heads of the beast and this and that, the details. But Rome gave him his, quote, seat. Right? Now, the biblical scriptural prophecy predicted it hundreds of years before it happened. So we have from 538 AD, right, the papacy ruled for exactly 1,260 years until 1798, when something that some people say was, you know, not even thinkable, incredible even, happened. The Pope was taken prisoner. Napoleon, this is where Napoleon comes in. Right? This is why Napoleon is so important historically and in biblical, we could say, even on a level of prophecy. Napoleon's general, Berthier, he captured the Pope and took him to France. So what we had right there was a deadly wound, right? A deadly wound. We had right there was a deadly wound, right? A deadly wound. The papacy had reigned exactly 1,260 years. Now, could this be a coincidence? Why did Berthier do it? Well, we know Napoleon, he wanted to rule the world, and the papacy stood in his way, right? Did these ones know that they were fulfilling prophecy? Right? Now, here's where we bring it forward to today, right? And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 3. Now, here's where Mussolini comes into the picture, right? So we see him here posing, right, with, we could say, with his namesake, you know, posing with Red Rome, with Esau, right, with Kaiser, right, as it be or as it were. And in 1929, now here's where the connection of the fascist invasion of Ethiopia, right, and making that war against Christ in his kingly character, right, in that second advent, right, the throne of David, Ethiopia, that biblical country. With Ethiopia, this man was born there during the time of Rastafari, Kadamawi Haile Selassie. So we have in 1929, take note, the Italian government recognized Vatican City as an independent state. Once again, the Pope was king. Now remember that Rome didn't like kings, right? This is the whole controversy with Julius Caesar, or Julius Caesar, right? And one of the reasons that it's been put forward that they killed him, to try to stop Rome from becoming a monarchy and remain a republic, but it became a monarchy, and the key word sound was the Kaiser. Kaiser became the title of those who would come in. So here we get where the Pope now in 1929 once again was king. On March 9th, 1929, right, it was said that the peoples of the entire world are with us. The Pope said that the peoples of the entire world are with us. The San Francisco Chronicle, it published an account of the pact signing. So there was a pact that was signed between Benito Mussolini. So while Benito Mussolini was targeting Ethiopia and the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, you know, Christ in the Messiah in his kingly advent prophecy, right? We had this going on in 1929, right? So the San Francisco Chronicle published an account of the pact signing on the front page. And you know what it said on the newspaper? It read actually just like this: Mussolini and Gaspari, Mussolini and Gaspari signed historic pact. Heal wound of many years. Heal wound of what? Of many years. This is prophecy, brothers and sisters, right? The Bible, the scriptures prophesied that his wound would be healed. So it was a deadly wound, right? Back in 1798, right? And then we come to 1929, March 9th, and this wound, right, of many years, right? This deadly wound of many years was healed. So the Bible prophesied that the wound would be healed, and the newspaper, right, San Francisco Chronicle, it confirmed it in exactly the same words. This is in 1929. So though this great organization called the papacy was not officially established until 538 AD, So when we're talking about Christianity or the Holy Black Roman Empire, or the Roman Empire, because there was that presence there, we have to note prior to 538 AD and after, the Apostle Paulos, right, he also saw forces at work that were preparing the way, right? So we can get into the background and trace it all the way back to the times of the Romans. And the key man, right, one of the key men in this equation is the one known as KAISER is the one known as Caesar, right? So we have Benito Mussolini. This is what shows that not only the fascist invasion, right, the Antichrist invasion of Ethiopia, right, and the atrocities that was done, that's significant right there, because the Bible prophesies. See what this guy said? He said right here, we consider peace a catastrophe for human civilization, right? So what was the nature of Esau, right? The nature of Esau was what? A warlike nature, right? This war, he's a man of the streets or a man of the field, right? They're out there running all over. Mussolini and at times went all the way to the Horn of Africa to fight against an ancient Christian, one of the first Christian nations. For Christian reasons? For biblical reasons? No. To fulfill prophecy and for the evil reasons that the scripture and the prophecy says that they would do. So what do you say, America? Right? So the Benito Mussolini, this is looking at this history. See, 1929. Why is 1929 significant? So in spite of all that's said about Benito Mussolini, people often avoid the biblical prophecy concerning that deadly wound. Remember, that was 1929. And therefore, 7 years later, would that attack go on against the Israelites of Ethiopia, against the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, against the King of Kings, right, anointed, right, upon the throne of great King David, right, 1936. So you see the connection. There's a big biblical connection. That's not our main focus right here, but it is important. And this is why you see, even within the symbology, we can see clearly the Roman symbology. In fact, it was their intentional plan to resurrect Rome. In other words, the resurrection of Rome needed the destruction of Ethiopia. Just check that right there. Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians and the male children of Israel? That the resurrection of Rome needed the destroying or destruction of Ethiopia. This was Mussolini's, the black shirts. This was the whole plan, right? So you can see where they were consciously, right, restoring and renewing, because they already understood the prophecy on the other side. They understood clearly the prophecy concerning the line of the tribe of Judah, the Israelites of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie I. They understood that. They understood the effect of us over here in the Americas. They can see the rise in the consciousness. They saw our black John the Baptist, Mark Messiah Garvey, speak about Ethiopia, and the effects, right, of that one crying in the wilderness was very, very real, right? So they understood that they had to act. Right? And act, they did act. Right? Benito Mussolini did act. So even though people might laugh him off and speak about these things in the way they do, they don't understand the significant biblical prophecies. Right? And one reason it seems as though why the Western Gentile so-called Christian world avoids this, because as you get into these facts concerning the late 20s, the roaring 20s, and you get into these facts concerning 1929, you get into the facts concerning what Mussolini did then with the deadly wound of the beast, a big, great biblical prophecy there, accurate even to the 1,260 years, it's accurate to that time period as well, you know. Then you will have to continue to say, well, what else did Mussolini do? Well, he invaded Ethiopia. Why would he do that? He was trying to conquer the conquering line of the tribe of Judah. Uh-oh, biblical prophecy. The same thing that was done to David when David might assume the throne of Israel, right? The same thing, that same sort of attack, you know, kind of went on. But even this right here is even more so, right? Because we get the Old Testament foreshadowing, and then we see the full, right, of this particular biblical prophecy right here. So the Pope's connection, see, and many of our ancestors, right, from that time back in the roaring 20s, they understood, right? We the Black Jews of Harlem, you know, Ethiopian World Federation that would rise up later on. You know, many of them understood this. This is what motivated black people, because black people had a more sober, right? A more sober version, right, of Christianity and even of religion. We see great examples where they were maybe of different even denomination as Christians, but could get together on significant matters of survival, right, of black people's survival, right, and even see those prophecies, right, that the black Jew was involved, the black Christian was involved, right, and there were other black people that were not even in the Judeo-Christian view, but we recognize that, well, if the Bible said these things, and look, behold, look and see, we're seeing these things right here. So a lot of people spook this out right here and try to make it seem like it's something just to come, but this has been going on. This has been happening, right? It's been happening, right? It's been going on. It's been happening. For example, right here, this cartoon, Pa. They were uncivilized savages without ideals. See, this is what happened to the Ethiopians, how the Ethiopians, are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me? Oh, children of Israel. So when we saw this is what happened to the Ethiopians at that time, right? The spirit, the consciousness was there to react. The consciousness was there to see the connection, right? Unlike today, right, where it seems as though there's this antagonism to the Bible, right? But it's because a lot much more confusion, COINTELPRO, has been bred. And COINTELPRO means counterintelligence. So we sought to use this video to point out some of the intelligence, right, that connects the true, right, pronunciation of the name and the true link of the name Kaiser, right, both with Rome, with the Khazarians, with Esau, with the Hittites, and with Julius Caesar, and with biblical prophecy coming all the way down to these latter days and times, brothers and sisters. All right, so maybe this will express at least another view, scripturally, biblically, but also with the real world history, right, of why did Italy, fascist Italy, no, why did Roman Catholic Italy? See, we have to understand that it was a Christian nation, right, that was being attacked, an ancient Christian nation, a Judeo-Coptic, Judeo-Christian nation that was being attacked by another Christian nation. So what we really have here is Antichrist versus Christ, especially Christ in his kingly character. The Antichrist, Roman fascist Italy, its attack against Ethiopia, and also the prophecy concerning the deadly wound. This is when the Pope and Vatican became not only, the Pope was not only head of a church, bishop of a church, but he became king. This is where the Pope's influence into politics has continued to grow ever since then, speaking of the events that occurred in 1929. And remember, 1929 was a year before Rastafari Mekonnen Nugustafari was crowned, was anointed, right? Was anointed and crowned. See, the anointing is the part that a lot of people leave out. Right? Her Majesty was crowned too, but she was not anointed. But His Imperial Majesty was both anointed. See, that's the Davidic, right, Israelites of Ethiopia, right, putting the whole thing together. The Ark of the Covenant is not apart from the Israelites of Ethiopia, right? It's not apart from the Judeo, right, Hebraic roots, right, of that civilization of our kingdom. We as Israelites had a kingdom in the tops of the mountains. Thus we have Psalm 87 verse 4. With Ethiopia, this man was born there.